G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with legendary Nashville session musician Charlie McCoy. Charlie has been playing harmonica since 1949 and has been in the music industry since the 1950s. Charlie decided to become a session musician in 1959 after witnessing the recording process of Brenda Lee's Sweet Nothings. His big break as a session musician came in 1961 when he played harmonica on Roy Orbison's record, Candyman. Following this record, he would go on to perform on many records by many well-known artists. He would perform on many Bob Dylan albums, including Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited. He would also go on to play on 13 Elvis albums. Charlie is also a solo artist in his own right, having won a Grammy for his 1972 album, The Real McCoy, one of just 46 solo albums he has released to date. G'day Charlie, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Thank you so much.
Let's start off at the beginning. You were born in 1941 in West Virginia. Do you remember much of your childhood?
I was born in the town where Hank Williams passed away. When I was 8 years old, it was summertime. I saw an ad in a comic book. You can play harmonica in 7 days or your money back. Send 50 cents and a box top. That was 1949. 50 cents, you could buy something with 50 cents. You can't anymore. So I begged my mother for 50 cents, sent it off. Harmonica came, and after about a day, she said, "Could you take it outside?" An 8-year-old with a harmonica is not a pleasant thing to hear. So I did. I went outside with it, and I learned then that dogs and cats didn't like it.
You mentioned there Hank Williams, and I'm thinking, is that kind of like the music you grew up listening to, like that kind of country music, and like what was that? Was that the kind of music you grew up listening to?
Not really, because in the early 50s when rock and roll hit the radio, and I also got a guitar that year, and when I heard rock and roll, I got all into guitar. Bill Haley and the Comets, Elvis, Carl Perkins, Chuck Berry. And I was a real rock and roller through my mid-teens, and so that I was doing that. But then when I was 16, I heard a record on the radio by a blues artist named Jimmy Reed, who was a great harmonica player. And I said, "Well, wait a minute, that's a harmonica. I need to learn to do that." So I got very interested in harmonica again, and hey, the rest is history. I've been playing it 74 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, because we're talking like when you first got into it, you mentioned 1949 when you got your first harmonica, and then how did you go about teaching yourself how to play like in those days?
I listened to Jimmy Reed, and then I discovered through him other R&B players like Little Walter, Slim Harpo, Sonny Boy Williamson, and there was a radio station I could pick up at night that played all this music. And I would just listen to it. I don't know. I figured it out some way. But in the meantime, I was playing guitar in a rock and roll band and singing. I'd moved to Florida by then. And one night, a friend of mine took me to a country music dance. I didn't know anything about country music, really. And while we were there, I was watching the people dance, and he slipped off. And next thing I know, the leader of the band is introducing me in the crowd to come up and sing. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know any country music. He said, "Go up there and do what you normally do. They can do it." So I went up and I asked the band leader, I said, "Can we play Johnny Be Good?" And the band leader said, "Yeah, what key?" I was surprised. And I said, "Can I borrow a guitar?" So the electric guitar player let me have his guitar. And we did it, and the band played it great. They said, "We want you to come back every Saturday and play 10 minutes an hour rock and roll for the young people." And I said, "Okay." So I go back on Saturday nights and play a few songs. One night, a songwriter from Nashville was there. His name was Mel Tillis, and he heard me, and he said, "Boy, you come to Nashville, I'll get you on records." Wow. I said, "Yeah, okay." So the day after high school was over, I drove to Nashville, and I went to the office where he said his manager was. And when I walked in from Florida, and I want to talk to Mel Tillis, and receptionist said, "Mel's out of town." We didn't have cell phones in those days. But he said, "I'll let you talk to his manager." So the guy came out. His name was Jim Denny. And he said, "Mel told me about you. You want to get some auditions?" And I said, I'm thinking, duh, yes, that's why I came. And so he took me to audition for Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley. I didn't even know who they were. And I played Johnny B. Good, to play the guitar and sang rock and roll. And they both turned me down. They said, we're not doing this kind of music here. And I thought, well, this was a wasted drive, 900 miles each way. And finally, then Owen Bradley said, I'm having a session today. Would you like to watch? And I said, okay. I had nothing else to do. I went back to that studio and watched 13-year-old Brenda Lee record her first hit record. And when I saw those musicians work and heard the first playback, I thought right then, I don't want to be a singer. I want to do this, play on records. So I came back a year later to stay, and a year after that, I got my first real record session with an unknown singer from Sweden named Anne Margaret. She was 20 years old.
You mentioned the Brenda Lee record there, Sweet Nothings. What was it, though, about that session musicians and that session in particular that kind of made you go, this is what I want to do? Because, you'd performed before, you mentioned before you performed Johnny B. Good and but what was it about being kind of not a performer, but being a session musician that kind of appealed to you so much?
What really got to me, number one, there were no music stands in the studio. None. These guys listened to this song that they'd never heard before. And in 30 minutes, they recorded it. And everyone, it was like they knew what to do. They knew how to stay out of each other's way. And I was thinking, this is amazing how they put this together so fast. It was really sensational to watch that. And then that night, I go back to my hotel. I can't hardly sleep. I'm so excited. And Mel's manager calls me and he said, there's another session tomorrow morning. You want to go watch it? I'm thinking, are you kidding? Of course I do. And I walked in and there were the Jordanaires. Okay. I didn't know. I thought they only sang with Elvis. I didn't know that they were in Nashville almost every day of the year doing studio work. Denny brought me over there and I said, is that the Jordanaires? He said, yeah, you want to meet them? Yeah. So he introduced me to the music guy, the guy that does the arrangements, named Neil Matthews. And we talked a little bit. And he had the only music stand in the room now. And on that stand, there was a yellow tablet with these numbers written on it. Well, I had a whole bunch of music theory in high school. And what I had was classical theory, but this was like a new way to write music that was very simple and very logical. And when I saw it, I understood it right away. And I asked him, I said, can I look at your tablet a minute? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And I was looking, I'm thinking, this is brilliant. He said, you know what that is? And I said, I think I do. And he said, well, you're the only musician around here that does, because the musicians weren't using it, only the Jordanaires. So I go back to Florida, spend almost a year at the university studying music, and quit and move back to Nashville to stay. So that's how I got started.
Before you kind of did more session work, you got to record your own record, Cherry Berry Wine, I think it was. And that must have been pretty cool being able to record your own record.
Well, it wasn't anything I was planning on. I was living with a songwriter, and every day people would come and write with him. And I was fascinated. I'd just sit and watch and listen. And this guy I knew in Florida had showed me this song he was starting. And so I asked the guy, I said, hey, I've got an idea here from a guy in Florida. You want to hear it and see if we could try to finish this? He said, yeah. So I played and sang what I knew of it. He said, that's great. He said, come on, we'll finish this. So we write a couple verses. And he said, listen, when in Nashville at that time, the big publishing companies, when some of their songwriters would have new songs, they would call a demo session, and they would book musicians to come in like they were making a record to make demonstration of the songs. And he said, listen, you need to sing this when we do the demo. That's not my style at all. And I said, okay, I'll sing it. Well, about a month later, same guy, Jim Denny, calls and he says to me, I played your song, the new song, for a record producer in New York, and he wants to record you. What? Me? Yeah, singing. Oh my gosh. And I wasn't counting on that. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And we did the session with the same Nashville 18 musicians that I watched work with Brenda Lee, which was very cool. And the record went to, the big magazine in this country that judges records is called Billboard. The record went to number 99 on the Billboard pop chart for 1 week and dropped out. So I have been in the pop chart. In the meantime, but what's great about this songwriter, one day a woman came over and they were writing a song, and he said, listen, get your harmonica and play along with us. I said, okay. So when they got finished, he said, that's great. I'm going to ask you if you can be on the demo session. Play that. I said, okay, that'd be great, So we went and did that. Same thing happened. A month later, publisher calls me, said, I just got a call from Chet Atkins. The song that you played harmonica on the demo, he's going to record that song on an unknown singer from Sweden named Anne Margaret. And he wants you to play exactly what you played on the demo. So I already knew what to play because, like I said, me and every guy in the studio was distracted. 20-year-old Anne Margaret, So, and then at the end of the session, the bass player walked over to me and he said, you free Friday? I was free the rest of my life. He said, come back here. I'm recording Roy Orbison. Oh, I was a huge fan of Roy Orbison. We did a song called Candyman. When it hit the radio, my phone started ringing. It's still ringing today. I play a lot of different instruments. I became known as a utility man, but I would have got in the door without the harmonica.
Do you remember much of that Roy Orbison session? I mean, you mentioned you were a huge fan. It must have been fantastic being able to record with him.
Oh, it was great. And the B-side was Blue Bayou. He had just written that song, Blue Bayou, which later became a big hit for Linda Ronstadt. So I had a big part of it. And like I said, when it hit the radio, I started getting calls. But then later, I started branching off to other instruments. I played bass, 4 Dylan albums, Leonard Cohen, Charlie Rich, and I played keyboards, organ. I learned to play vibraphone, and I played trumpet on the song by Bob Dylan, Everybody Must Get Stoned. And I played baritone saxophone on Pretty Woman, Roy Orbison. So it's helped me a lot to be versatile and to be able to play other instruments. But like I said, harmonica is where it's at, and that's what I owe it all to.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that you're able to play so many instruments. And I mean, like, how does someone do that? Like, are you able to identify like the similarities between the instruments and like the notes that you're playing, and like how do you go about that?
Well, I know like I said, I had a huge music education when I was younger, and I'm able to I just get the instrument and find the notes and mess around and figure it out. And it's my education really helped me. And of course, I've got a better than average ear. That was the gift I have is the ear. And so anyway, I'm still working.
I mean, would you say that because you've been largely self-taught on the instruments that has made you a better like player of them, especially the harmonica?
Yes, absolutely. And what I must say is that the Nashville recording musicians made me a much better musician because they taught me, if you want to be a studio musician in Nashville, there's 2 things you got to know. Number 1, check your ego at the door. Nobody cares how much you know. All they care about is what can you do for this song now? That's all. And the singer and the song are the picture. The musicians are the frame. That's the whole Nashville theory, the way they do make records.
No, and fantastic advice there. And like going through like sessions in the 60s, like were they like, how did sessions work back then? Were they like pretty, like, were they big days? Like, were you always like constantly kind of doing stuff?
Oh, yeah. In the late 60s, probably through the middle 70s, I was doing more than 300 sessions a year.
Yeah.
And there would be days when you'd do 4 a day. Because see, our musicians there recording, we were in the musicians union, and a session was 3 hours. And you usually record 3 or 4 songs in 3 hours because that was the Nashville way. They needed to be, in those days, country music didn't sell a lot. So it was important to be efficient and get a lot done for the record company's dollar. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It was, and like I said, that original group of studio musicians, they figured this out when they got started, and they taught me, and it's still that way today. The same ideas are still in place because it works.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think a little bit earlier, your work with Bob Dylan, and August 1965, or I think it was August 4th or something like that. You played guitar on Desolation Row by Bob Dylan, and I'm thinking, like, did you have much time to kind of work out what you were going to play, or did you kind of just kind of go in there and just get it done?
No, it was the producer called me because I told him I was coming to New York. He said, "Call me and I can get you Broadway theater tickets." I said, "Okay." So I got there and I called him and he said, "Hey, come over by Columbia Studio today. I want to introduce you to Bob Dylan." I said, "Okay." And I went in and he introduced us, and Dylan said, "I'm getting ready to do a song. Why don't you grab that other guitar over there and play along?" Oh, what? Oh, okay. And that was Desolation Row. And it was two takes because the bass player had another session to go to. And yeah, I was flying by the seat of my pants because that was, that's a lot of playing on that song. I was the only one really playing background stuff. According to the producer, that helped Dylan decide he'd come to Nashville and try to record there. So he came and did Blonde on Blonde, John Wesley Harding, Nashville Skyline, three huge albums. So,
Yeah.
and then after he came, the whole folk rock music scene decided, oh, it must be okay to go to Nashville. Boy, and they came in like it was like floodgates open.
As a session musician, do you enjoy being challenged like that, like being put on the spot? Like, do you enjoy a bit of a challenge like that?
Absolutely, because that's because of Nashville, because of the way we like to get a lot of music done. Many of the recording centers don't even have a clock, like Muscle Shoals, Memphis, Motown. They don't even have a clock. However long it takes, but in Nashville, because of us with the union, so it was the way we recorded, and many of those great records, especially the country records in the 60s, they were first takes. I mean, it was sometimes the first take was magic. Many other recording centers could never say that. And like the big group in Los Angeles, they call the Wrecking Crew. They used all written arrangements. They weren't making anything up on the spot like we were.
Yeah, and of course in those days we're talking recording direct to like mono or stereo tape, and I mean, do you think that like that was important to the music because you're all there in one room, trying to get this song, was that important to the sound and to the feeling of the music of the time?
Yes, I think so because number one, the studios, of course, there was only two to begin with. They didn't even own headphones, so everyone had to play soft. The drummer in particular had to play soft so everyone in the room could hear. And everyone together like that, listening like just what you normally can hear, I think it was very special. And the singers, the artists, they got the feel, they'd get in the groove, and yeah, it was some neat stuff that happened.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's like what can then in saying that then like for those that are making music now or producers that are trying to put together these songs, like what can like younger like musicians and producers learn from those tape days, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the new producers who are younger than my grandchildren are really relying on technology a lot. Okay, technology is good, but I don't want to see it take the place of people.
Yeah.
I want to hear music played by real people on real instruments. I mean, that's just me. And people can say, "Oh, you're old school," and I said, "Yeah, you bet, I'm old school."
On that subject of tape and it being like, and everyone in one room and like, recording, just straight to the tape. I mean, I think a great example of the brilliance of that is definitely "Rainy Day Woman" with Bob Dylan. I mean, that recording is very unique, and I mean, of course, you played trumpet on that, and I mean, yeah, can you tell me a little bit about like how that kind of came to be?
We were in the afternoon. The producer came out to me and he said, "Tonight, he wants to do a song. I don't know if this word translates, but with a Salvation Army sound. Like in our country, there's this organization called the Salvation Army, and it's usually elderly people, and they do a lot of charity work, and a lot of them have bands, and some of these people that play in the bands are, they're not too good anymore. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's almost like Dixieland. But anyway, he said, so he wants to have a Salvation Army sound. He said, maybe get a trumpet and a trombone. I said, okay. Do you want the trumpet to be good? He said, no, it's Salvation Army. I said, okay, then I'll play. And I said, and I'll call a trombone player. I know the guy we can call. So that was the idea. And then he told, when we were getting ready to record it, he told all the musicians, I want you guys to live it up in there, holler and yell and like it's a party. And that's what they did. But I think we probably did 2 takes, maybe 3 at the most. But yeah, it went down very quickly.
You've been lucky that you've been able to work with Bob Dylan quite a bit, and also you got to play bass on a Leonard Cohen album too. And these are 2, great musical poets. And I mean, from your perspective as a session musician, like, was there any differences between Cohen's approach to recording to that of Dylan's?
Well, Dylan didn't have much to say at all. In fact, I heard one producer describe him as he didn't know the answer to hello. But Leonard Cohen was, it was early on in his career, and he was finding his way, and he was just all into his own songs, and he would I was playing bass on those, and he was just kind of we had all the lights were out in the studio except for one little candle in front of his music stand, and so it was and like I said, he was kind of new at it and trying to find his way, and he was he was a bit nervous, I think, probably later on, because that was the only album he did in Nashville. But later on, I'm sure he got, because he had some success, that song he wrote, Hallelujah, was a great song.
Oh yeah,
they had a great record on that.
We recently on the show we had Al Cooper on, and I wanted to bring up Al because I know you worked with him on his albums. He was on Blonde and Blonde as well. I mean, do you have a favorite Al Cooper memory?
Well, we did an album with him. He came back after Blonde and Blonde to do a solo album, and it was called I Stand Alone. And I don't know, we were talking about something, because at the time on the weekends I was playing rock and roll or R&B. We had a little band, They were studio guys, but they wanted to get out and rock and roll a little bit on the weekends, and we'd play at university fraternity parties and the military base, places like that. And so I showed him that I could play bass and trumpet at the same time. And later on, the rumor got around that that's what I did on one of the Dylan songs on Blonde and Blonde, which is not true at all, because we had a bass player on Blonde and Blonde. But I've been living that down ever since. And I believe it was Al Cooper that spread the word.
Another artist that, is certainly in the same caliber of Dylan without a doubt, and that's Elvis Presley. And I know you started, I think your first, I think I'm right, I might be wrong on this, but I think your first time playing with Elvis was on his soundtrack album Harem Scarum, or am I right on that?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, electric guitar. I mean, meeting Elvis for the first time, I mean, like, take me through that. How do you remember that?
The way it came about was that the movie company changed the dates of their soundtrack recording. The guys that he used all the time were already working with other people, and the movie people told Scotty Moore, his guitar player, well, tell him to change because it's Elvis. And Scotty said, you don't understand. In Nashville, you don't cancel on one artist to work with another. You just don't do that. He said, but don't worry about it. This town's full of great musicians. I'll get you a great band. So we were all new. We all didn't quite know what to expect. Elvis walked in the door. He walked right up to every one of us, shook our hand, and said, thank you for helping me. And that kind of set the mood, All right, this guy's all right, He's very cool. And after that album, after that movie track, Scotty talked him into keeping me because I was a utility guy, And I ended up on 13 albums with him, 6 more movie tracks, and then there was that time in 1970 they called the marathon sessions when we went in there for like a week and a half, just doing what he wanted to do, and it was great. And we cut a lot of songs, and He was great. I enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, yeah, the majority of your work with Elvis was on his soundtracks, and I've read that Elvis, like during the like later part of the '60s with the soundtrack kind of albums, he didn't always enjoy making the soundtrack albums. I mean, did you find that, or is that like just completely not correct at all?
Colonel Tom had this, they had a business going on the side, and they called it the Elvis Presley Music Group. So they had their own company publishing and their own writers. And the way it worked was that when they got a new script for a new movie, they would send the script to their own writers and say, "We need a song here, a song here," and these writers would compete for the spot in the movie. And so all that music, all those songs weren't that great. And one night he said to us when he figured out no one in the control room could hear him, and he said, "Hey guys, I know some of these songs aren't so great, but let's do them as good as we can." And that, so yeah, he understood that. But later on, he started standing up to himself to do a Christopherson song and to do Jerry Reed, Guitar Man. He wanted to do that, and they were trying to find out who the publisher was so they could go buy the song, or and they would do that a lot if he was doing gospel music. They'd call these songwriters and ask them if they'd sell the song and not tell them Elvis was recording it. It was kind of sneaky.
Yeah, and you mentioned the marathon sessions, and I think that those sessions and those albums are it was in some ways like, I mean, a return to the greatness that Elvis was. I mean, he had all this soundtrack stuff during the '60s, and then like the '70s. I think he really came back to what made him great. And I mean, do you have a favorite track off some of those marathon sessions where like Elvis was going great and you were going great? I mean, like, yeah, like, is there any tracks that come to mind?
I played on Big Boss Man harmonica and High Heel Sneakers harmonica, and then he did a song called "Mary in the Morning." I think I played vibraphone or organ on it, and a song called "The Next Step Is Love," which I played organ on. But yeah, I love the time I spent. But when he started the marathon sessions, one night we got out in the morning in time to go to breakfast and then go to our 10 o'clock other session. I mean, when they said marathon, they weren't kidding. We went all night down to the next morning. And I had another morning set. See, he never did work in the mornings, like 10 o'clock in the morning, or normally not even in the afternoon. He would wait till evening and work. So several of us had other sessions to go to, and we were like, "Oh, give me some more coffee."
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, we'll move on from Elvis in a moment, but I wanted to ask you this as well. Like, have you seen the new Elvis movie that recently came out? I think it came out last year. Did it capture who you knew Elvis to be?
I thought the young guy did a great job, but the most impressive thing to me was Tom Hanks playing the Colonel, because I met the Colonel once, and Tom Hanks got that accent he had. The Colonel was from Holland originally, and so he still had an accent. And Tom Hanks was so great. But as far as the way it all went down at the end, I don't know that anybody totally knows, but I know the Jordanaires. I just read their book, and they said the big problem was when they started working in Las Vegas. They were doing 2 shows a night, and he got into getting some chemical help. You know what I mean? To go and then to sleep. And they said, Jordanaires in their book, they said if he would have done only 1 show a night, it would have been great, and they would have probably paid him more. I mean, he was making plenty of money anyway. Anyway, it was sad the way it all came to a close. At the end, too bad. And the world will never see another artist of that stature ever again.
Moving on from your work with Elvis, I'm interested to know too, Charlie, your opinion on this, because we're talking like the later '60s, or like even the mid '60s, when these British groups are starting to enter the American scene, and the Stones, the Beatles would make use of harmonica on some of their tracks. And I'm wondering, what did you think of some of the harmonica playing of some of the British groups? Like, did you think that like that's pretty good, or like what did you think?
Well, it was people who was obviously it was their second instrument. What was it? Love Me Do with the Beatles. I'm not sure which one of those guys did that, but it really fit the song well. And in 1977, Ringo did an album in Nashville, a country album, and I played on that, and which was great. It was a normal Nashville session, Nashville musicians, and we played all these songs. But I liked a lot of the British thing. Peter and Gordon. I like those two guys, and of course, the Stones have proven they were the real deal forever and ever. I mean, they're still going. It's incredible. And then McCartney was a genius. I heard the song yesterday has been recorded so many times by other artists, and it's just an amazing song. So yeah, I liked I liked what McCartney did in particular when he got his own band. It became real evident that he was the music mind of the Beatles to me.
When you played on the Boxer, you used a bass harmonica, and I should have heard of what a bass harmonica is, but I hadn't before doing this, and I'm thinking what makes a bass harmonica different to a normal harmonica? I assume it's the more bass note kind of deal.
It's very large. I don't have one down here in Florida. I have one at home, of course, but and the notes are very low pitch, very low. And unlike a normal harmonica, you can't play inhale on a bass harmonica. All notes are exhale, and it takes a lot more wind. But when we did the Boxer, Paul Simon dictated every note for me to play, and he was right. Later, when he did his first solo album, he flew me to New York to play on a song called Papa Hobo. Once again, he dictated every note, and he was right. That guy was a genius, Paul Simon. Think of all the hits they had, and he had. They're all different. They're all different. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Styles and music is different.
Yeah, no,
most people get in a groove and they get a sound going, and that's what they do. But he was very versatile.
Oh no, definitely. Harmonica is, and you kind of mentioned this with when we're talking about the Stones and the Beatles. That was obviously their second kind of instrument. It wasn't their primary instrument, and it sounds like a lot of that's kind of what the harmonica is to a lot of people. I'm thinking, you as someone who's a pro at it, what's the difference? How can you tell when someone's a pro at the harmonica than say when it's their second instrument? What are they doing differently?
Most of the time, the difference is that the ones who are not don't know when to quit. If you hear bands jamming out, you go into a club or something, there's a band playing. A lot of young harmonica players, they just want to play all the time, and that's a big Nashville thing. You don't play all the time. The best thing you can learn is when not to play, because the sound of the harmonica captures people's ears, whether you're any good or not. The sound captures ears. And especially with female singers, you're in the same register as their vocals, and it can really be distracting. Yeah, but I know in Nashville right now there are 5 very fine harmonica players, and we're all friends, and and it's great. And there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of great players in this country. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, can people still get you for sessions if they want?
Well, I've done 8 so far this year. Next week, I've got 2 booked next week and a couple the week after. So I'm still playing. I'm 82 years old, but I'm still playing. I'm playing harmonica as good as ever. I know enough to know that I'm still playing as good as I can, and I still love studio work. I really do. The one thing I can say for technology, it's allowed me to play on records from down here that are recorded in Nashville. They send the tracks down on the internet. I go into a studio and play my part, and they send it back to them. That's the best thing I can say for the new technology.
Just before, we're getting towards the end of the interview, but I wanted to, before we kind of wrapped it up, Charlie, I wanted to kind of draw attention more to your solo career as well. I thought that's pretty important, and of course, I mean, not only have you played with great people like Elvis, Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, but you've also had a pretty decent solo career in your own right, I reckon, because I mean you won a Grammy in 1972 for your album The Real McCoy. I mean, yeah, that must have been great getting praise for your own work.
Well, it was after I recorded the Cherry Berry Wine, and that the year after that record company quit. They just quit, went out of business. The guy had been doing it for many many years, and he had this comedy album that was huge. And he called me and he said, "Well, I hate to do this because I think we had something going here, but I'm retiring." He said,
Mm.
"I'm tired. I want to see the world." I said, "Hey, it's no problem because." I I didn't set out to be an artist. I'm now doing studio work, and that's what I wanted to do, right? And one day I'm on a session with Roy Orbison's producer. He said, "Come out and have lunch. I want to talk to you." So I went to his office and he said, "I want you to make some records." And I said, "And do what?" He said, "I don't care. Just go in the studio and be creative." So we had the band in the 60s that we were playing weekends. It was a great band. The drummer was Kenny Buttry, who played on all the Dylan, and he played with Neil Young, Heart of Gold. He played on Margaritaville. He played on guitar player was Wayne Moss, who he's a great studio musician. Anyway, so we started recording R&B because one of the guys was Mac Gaden, who wrote this huge song eventually called "Everlasting Love" that was a big hit,
Mm.
and he was writing, and so we were doing cover songs or originals like that. And for 8 years, we made records, couldn't give away. And every year I'd go into the boss of the record company. I'd say, "Hey, you know what? It ain't working." He said, "Keep looking, you'll find it." And I
Mm.
can't even imagine anybody saying that after 8 years. And then
Mm.
we did an album, the first album with a lot of instrumentals on it, "The World Of." Then we followed it up with the Real McCoy, but this was in 1968. Half of it was R&B, half of it was country instrumentals. A DJ in Florida started playing one of these songs. "Today I started loving you again." And he kept calling the record company. He said, "You guys have a hit record if you'll put it out." What? This a harmonica record.
Mm.
So that's the way it happened. And we put it out. It was what, top 15. The album won a Grammy. I couldn't believe it. 2 albums later, we went to #1 with "Good Time Charlie." And so yeah, so now there's 46 albums out there and 3 EPs, instructional DVD, and an autobiography. And we do a record order. My wife and I do a mail order, so that it's still going.
What I love about your albums, your solo albums, is and it has they're so unique because on a lot of the tracks you kind of let the harmonica do the singing, and I think that's just it's just so unique.
Well, doing studio work in Nashville, you learn how important lyrics are. And I believe that when people listen to instrumentals of songs they're familiar with, I think they subconsciously sing along with it. That's why when I do songs, like, people know I want to do the phrasing the same way it would if you were singing it. And that was something I really strive for, was the phrasing, like I was saying the words.
Yeah, and it's worked out fantastically. I mean, they're great records, and just before we go, I want to just highlight your newest album, and Charlie Goes to Brazil, and you have it. There's a really good track off that called Rio by Night. I think it's the first track off the album. I think it's the opening track, and yeah, how did you guys kind of get that to kind of happen? Like, yeah, how did it come to be?
Well, I wrote the song. In fact, the same company also did the one earlier with the music of Henry Mancini. And they were talking one day, and he said, "You know what you ought to do? Let's do a bossa nova." And I said, "Okay, that interests me because I love that Brazil music. I really do." And especially that great composer, Jobim. He wrote "Girl from Ipanema" and "Quiet Nights" and a whole lot of great songs. I'm one of those people that now in this part of my career, when I get enthused about a project, my mind starts wanting to write now. And so I wrote that song. The second one on there was another song I'd written earlier with a French title, and I translated it to Portuguese because of Brazil. "Amor esta noite" means love tonight. And there was one other song I'd written on there that was a vocal on an album called "Lover's Key," and I did it as an instrumental. And we did 2 Jobim songs and one of a friend of mine in Nashville. But yeah, it was fun to do that. The bossa nova is great.
Look, and look, I just want to thank you for your time as well today. Like, I think we've touched on some such great stuff, and yeah, just a big thank you to you. Yeah.
Well, hey, you're certainly welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and we're going to go eat some seafood now.
That was legendary Nashville session musician Charlie McCoy. If you'd like to check out Charlie's new album and more recent work, you can head to Charlie's website at charliemccoy.com. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, we'd love it if you leave a review. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes. And to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.